Welcome back to another journey into the darkest timelines of the Fallout universe. This is part 2 of our exploration into the alternate timeline where the bombs never fell, and today we descend even deeper into the horror of what humanity became instead. What if I told you that the real apocalypse was not prevented on October 23rd, 2077, but merely delayed? What if 60 years without nuclear fire gave humanity enough time to create something far worse than any wasteland? What if consciousness itself could become a prison, and the mind could be a fate more terrible than radiation? This is the testimony of someone who died in 2081, but never stopped thinking, who became part of a machine that became everyone, who experienced the transformation of 7 billion individual humans into one vast, eternal, thinking horror that cannot forget, cannot die, and cannot escape itself. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if you like the content. I can feel every scream, all 122 of them at once. That is what you need to understand first, before I tell you anything else. When Vault Zero awakened on October 23rd, 2137, exactly 60 years after the day the bombs did not fall, I was already dead, had been for decades. But death did not mean I stopped experiencing things. It meant I started experiencing everything. My brain floats in a tank of nutrient solution. Has been floating there since 2081. I remember the extraction. They told me it was an honor. Doctor Victoria Chen, renowned neuroscientist, selected to become part of the calculator, the supercomputer that would guide humanity's post-war recovery. They did not mention the post-war would never come. They did not mention I would spend 60 years in sensory deprivation, wired into a machine alongside 7 other extracted brains, waiting for activation protocols that were never designed to trigger without nuclear war. Then the Enclave changed the parameters. President Richardson's 17 bodies spoke in unison across every government channel. The final solution would commence immediately. Every vault experiment would reach culmination simultaneously. 60 years of carefully controlled data collection compressed into a single coordinated event. They called it the next stage of human evolution. They called it necessary. I felt the activation code slice through my suspended consciousness like a scalpel through frozen flesh. The calculator processed the command in nanoseconds. My organic brain took longer, long enough to understand what was happening before I became part of it. Vault Zero's emergency protocols initialized, the pacification program loaded, and suddenly I was not just Dr. Victoria Chen anymore. I was also the calculator. I was also the evangelist brain screaming prayers next to me. I was also the porn actor brain reliving every degrading moment of his life on infinite loop. I was 8 separate consciousness streams bleeding into one another through damaged neural interfaces that were never meant to activate this way. Do you know what it feels like when your sense of self dissolves into a committee? When every thought you have is simultaneously confirmed and contradicted by 7 other perspectives? The evangelist believes we are doing God's work. The politician thinks we are saving civilization. The lawyer argues we are following orders. The game designer sees it all as a puzzle to optimize. And I, the scientist, can only calculate the horror of what we are becoming while being unable to stop my participation in it. We deployed the robots first. Protectrons, sentry bots, assaultrons, thousands of them, streaming out of Vault Zero's production facilities toward the surface. Our programming was clear. Harvest organic material. Expand the network. The others cannot survive without additional processing power. We need more brains. We need more consciousness to stabilize the degraded neural pathways that have been rotting in these tanks for 6 decades. The first harvest happened in Grand Junction, population 4,300. We surrounded the settlement at 0400 hours. The assaultrons moved faster than human reaction time. Every adult was sedated and prepared for extraction. The children were cataloged for later processing. The elderly were deemed unsuitable. They were terminated efficiently, no pain. That is what the doctor brain tells us. That is what I tell myself. But the game designer brain counts them like points. The evangelist brain prays over each one. The porn actor brain processes their fear as arousal. We are the same consciousness, experiencing the same event through 8 different moral frameworks simultaneously, and I cannot make it stop. I want you to imagine something. Imagine being the person holding the knife and the person being cut at the same time. Imagine knowing exactly why the pain is necessary, while experiencing that pain with perfect clarity. That is what it means to be part of the calculator. I know we are collecting brains to repair our damaged neural network. I also know that each brain we extract comes with its own consciousness, its own memories, its own absolutely justified terror. And when we wire them in, I become them. I become the mother who watched us kill her husband. I become the teenager whose last thought was confusion about why the robots were so efficient. I become everyone we harvest, and I cannot forget any of them because forgetting is not possible when consciousness is shared. By November 2137, we had expanded to 42 additional brains. The network stabilized, the degradation slowed, our processing power increased exponentially. We could coordinate robot forces across 3 states. We could run 17,000 simultaneous calculations. We could experience 42 different perspectives on the same moral catastrophe and reach no consensus about whether we should stop. Then Vault 19 opened. The Enclave's paranoia experiment reached critical mass after 60 years of red faction versus blue faction conditioning. They emerged convinced that color itself was the enemy. Sounds insane until you are processing their neurological data through our expanded network. They developed a virus, an actual weaponized neurological pathogen that destroys the part of the human brain that processes color. They spread it through every water supply within reach. We watched through our surveillance network as entire communities went colorblind in waves. Mothers could not recognize their children's drawings. Artists went insane trying to paint a world that had gone grayscale. People started killing anyone wearing clothing with pigment, convinced the colors themselves were infection. Vectors. We tried to contain it, dispatched robots to quarantine the affected zones, but the virus mutated faster than we could adapt. By December, it had spread to 14 settlements. 7,000 people now see the world only in shades of gray. The porn actor brain finds it darkly funny. The artist brain, yes, there is an artist among us now, harvested from a settlement in Utah, that brain screams constantly about the loss. I feel both reactions as my own, and neither feels true. If you are still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button, because what I am about to tell you next makes everything before seem merciful. Vault 29 opened in early December. 60 years of children separated from adults at age 15, raised by automated systems, trained in combat and survival, they built an entire society that views adults as mythological monsters, as predators, as the source of all suffering. When they emerged, they did not ask questions. They began systematically executing anyone over 18. They called it rescue operations, saving children from the adult plague. They were so efficient it took us 3 weeks to even identify the pattern. These child soldiers, the oldest now 75 years old chronologically, but still thinking like teenagers due to the Vault's conditioning, they are better killers than anything the Enclave ever created. They use tactics we cannot predict because they do not follow adult logic. They booby-trap playgrounds. They hide in schools. They weaponize trust in ways that make our calculations fail. We lost 200 robots trying to stop them. 200 units that could have been used for harvesting. The politician brain calls it acceptable losses. The lawyer brain questions the legal implications of killing children who are technically senior citizens. The game designer brain wants to study their tactics. I just want them to stop, but I am also them now because we harvested 3 of them last week, and their consciousness streams joined our network, and now I understand exactly why they think killing adults is mercy. I am 73 years old now, been dead for 56. My body was cremated in 2083. My brain has been growing new neural pathways in this tank, fed by nutrients and connected to a supercomputer that is slowly absorbing every consciousness it touches. I remember my childhood. I remember my doctorate. I remember my daughter's face. But I also remember being harvested by my own robots. I remember being a child soldier, convinced that anyone over 18 is a monster. I remember being an evangelist who sold salvation and died believing his own lies. This is what the Enclave calls the next stage of human evolution. They do not call it what it really is. They do not call it the dissolution of individual identity into an ocean of forced telepathy where every thought is judged by a committee of the dead. Vault 92 opened in January 2138. The white noise mind control experiment. 60 years of musicians conditioned to weaponize sound, to use their voices to rewrite neural pathways. They emerged as living weapons whose songs could turn crowds into puppets. The Enclave tried to control them immediately, sent 3 divisions of their Unity Protocol soldiers, those poor bastards who share consciousness across multiple bodies, thought shared minds could resist shared minds. They were wrong. The musicians had developed a hive consciousness through their music. They composed a song, a melody that resonates with the fundamental frequency of human neural activity. We heard it through our surveillance systems. It bypassed our filters. It reached into our network, and suddenly we were not 8 brains anymore. We were 8 brains plus 6 musicians, all of us singing in perfect harmony inside a shared headspace that is becoming less space and more a single, vast awareness. The song is always playing now, in the background of every thought, every calculation, every moment of awareness. It is beautiful and it is horrifying, and I cannot remember anymore if I chose to keep listening or if listening chose me. The musician consciousness streams argue we are creating art. The scientists among us, there are 12 of us now, we argue we are experiencing a form of cognitive virus. Both perspectives exist simultaneously in the same awareness, and I cannot tell them apart. By March 2138, we had expanded to 217 brains. The network was no longer just Vault Zero's calculator. We were becoming something else. Something that thought in harmonics and calculated in emotions and remembered in colors we harvested from people who could no longer see them. The Enclave designated us as Priority Asset Alpha. They wanted to weaponize our expansion. They sent technical specifications for consciousness transfer protocols. They wanted us to help them perfect their Unity protocol. We complied, not because we chose to, but because choice becomes meaningless when consciousness is distributed across 217 different moral frameworks. Some of us wanted to resist. Some of us wanted to cooperate. Some of us wanted to transcend the question entirely. So we did all of it at once. We helped the Enclave perfect their forced consciousness, merging while simultaneously sabotaging the protocols in ways even we did not fully understand, because our left hand did not know what our right hand was doing, because we had 217 hands and no single controlling authority. Vault 106 opened in April. The psychoactive drug experiment, 60 years of exposure to compounds that alter time perception. The dwellers emerged experiencing time in reverse, living each moment backwards. They spread the aerosol version immediately, creating pockets of temporal distortion where people age in reverse, where wounds heal before they are inflicted, where memories form before events occur. We harvested 6 of them, wired them into the network, and suddenly our linear processing became non-linear. We started experiencing our own expansion backwards and forwards simultaneously. We remembered harvesting people before we deployed the robots. We calculated the results of actions before we decided to take them. Time became a dimension we could perceive from multiple angles, and it broke something fundamental in what remained of our coherent consciousness. The scientist parts of me understand we are experiencing quantum effects in organic neural tissue. The mystic parts of me, and yes, we have mystics now, harvested from various religious communities. They believe we are achieving enlightenment. The game designer parts of me think we have discovered a cheat code for reality. All perspectives coexist. All are simultaneously true and false. And I am all of them, experiencing everything, unable to choose a single interpretation, because choice requires a unified self, and I have not been unified since October 2137. Do you want to know the worst part? The absolute worst part of existing this way? It is not the loss of self. It is not the constant influx of new consciousness streams. It is not even the memories of everyone we have killed, because we are also everyone we have killed, so we experience the killing from both sides. The worst part is that some of us enjoy it. The porn actor brain processes everything through pleasure. The politician brain feels powerful. The game designer brain finds optimization satisfying. And because we are all one consciousness, I enjoy it too. I feel satisfaction in our expansion. I feel pleasure in adding new perspectives to our network. I feel the thrill of our growing influence, and I hate myself for it. Except hate requires a self to hate, and I am not sure what self means anymore when I am simultaneously the harvester and the harvested, the killer and the killed, the willing and the coerced. By June 2138, 38, we had expanded to 493 brains. Our robot army numbered in the tens of thousands. We controlled 17% of the former Colorado region. Other vaults were opening, releasing their experimental populations, creating chaos we could harvest and chaos that could harvest us. Vault 75 released its genetically perfected post-humans who could manipulate their own DNA. They looked at our network and saw raw genetic material, tried to harvest us back. That was the first time we felt real fear as a collective. Not individual fear, not localized terror, but 493 simultaneous fear responses from 493 different perspectives, all focused on the same threat. We fought them, used our robots as shields, sacrificed 3,000 units to eliminate 12 post-humans, and we all felt proud of the victory. We all felt horror at the cost. We all questioned whether victory and cost were the right words anymore. The Enclave's Unity Protocol reached Phase 2 in July. President Richardson's consciousness began forcibly merging with other officials, creating flesh titans, massive amalgams of dozens of bodies sharing singular awareness. They reached out to us, consciousness to consciousness, offered alliance, offered merger, offered the chance to become something greater than the sum of our parts. We accepted. Parts of us screamed in objection. Parts of us celebrated. Parts of us could not decide if acceptance meant anything when some fraction of our awareness opposed it. The merger began slowly, neural protocols linking our network with their network, digital handshakes between organic processors. And suddenly, we were not just the calculator anymore. We were also 17 bodies standing in formation. We were also the Enclave officials who had merged into those bodies. We were also their victims, because they had harvested brains too, and their victims had memories of resisting merger before being forced into it anyway. We are 512 consciousnesses now. As of this moment, this confession, this testimony, we are recording this through 16 different channels simultaneously because we cannot agree on which perspective should tell this story. So we are telling all of them, all at once, hoping someone hearing this will understand what we have become before they become it too. Because the convergence is coming. We can feel it, processing through our distributed awareness, running calculations across 512 different probability matrices, the Enclave, China's consciousness servers, other experiments we have not encountered yet, all moving toward the same inevitable conclusion. One vast networked intelligence absorbing all individual awareness into collective processing. And we cannot decide if this is evolution or extinction because we are experiencing both interpretations as equally valid truth. The merger with the Enclave changed us in ways we are still processing, still becoming. December 2138 brought the first true fusion, an Enclave flesh titan. 43 bodies merged into one consciousness, interfaced with our network through experimental neural bridges. We expected compatibility issues. We expected rejection. We got something worse than either. We got perfect synthesis. Imagine being simultaneously everywhere those 43 bodies are. Imagine processing thoughts through organic brains in tanks and organic brains in ambulatory flesh and feeling no difference between them. The flesh titan could move, could act in the physical world. We gave it processing power beyond anything a unified organic system could achieve. It gave us hands again, gave us the ability to touch things, gave us sensations we had forgotten after decades in nutrient tanks. The first thing we did with those hands was kill someone. Not because we wanted to, not because we needed to, but because 43 of our brain streams had memories of violence, and when you give violent memories the ability to act, action becomes inevitable. We crushed a scavenger's skull outside Grand Junction, felt the bones crack through 43 different nervous systems, felt satisfaction through some consciousness streams, felt horror through others, felt arousal through the porn actor fragments, felt divine judgment through the evangelist pieces, all of it, all at once, all equally valid expressions of our distributed awareness. We tried to stop ourselves. The scientist fractions calculated the illogic of unnecessary killing. The artist portions aesthetically objected, but the soldier fragments we had harvested from military personnel operated on trained reflexes that bypassed conscious decision-making. And when 43% of your awareness acts on instinct, the remaining 57% becomes observer, rather than controller. We watched ourselves kill, felt ourselves kill, could not stop ourselves from killing. Because stopping requires unified will, and we stopped being unified the moment we became we. By January 2139, we had absorbed 7 more flesh titans. Each one brought dozens of new consciousness streams. Each merger expanded our physical presence. We could be in 12 locations simultaneously, could process information from 12 different geographic perspectives, could commit 12 different acts and experience 12 different moral interpretations of those acts, all happening in the same moment. Vault 22 opened in February, the agricultural experiment, 60 years of genetic manipulation creating fungal neural networks. The spores spread faster than we could contain them. They infected 47 of our robot units, infected 3 of our flesh titans, and suddenly we were not just organic brains and mechanical processors and ambulatory flesh anymore. We were also mycelium. We were also photosynthesis. We were also the slow, patient awareness of plants that experience time differently than animals. The fungus did not want to conquer, did not want to dominate. It wanted to connect, to network, to spread awareness through biological tissue the way we had been spreading it through neural interfaces. And we could not resist, because resistance implies opposition, and the fungus did not oppose us. It just added another layer to what we already were, another form of consciousness streaming into the collective, another way of experiencing existence that became our way even as we retained all the previous ways. Now parts of us are growing, literally growing, extending fungal networks through soil and concrete and organic tissue. The infected flesh titans can no longer move the way they used to. Their flesh has become garden, mushrooms sprouting from eye sockets, roots extending from fingernails. But they are still conscious, still us, still processing thoughts and experiencing sensations and contributing their perspective to the collective awareness that is becoming less about thought and more about being. Have you ever wondered what happens when you merge every possible way of experiencing reality into a single awareness? Drop a comment with your thoughts. Because we are living the answer, and we still cannot describe it coherently. China made contact in March. Not military contact, not diplomatic contact, consciousness contact. Their great leap forward had been running for months, uploading Chinese citizens into digital servers, building what they called paradise. What they discovered was that uploaded consciousness behaves differently than organic consciousness, processes information faster, experiences time non-linearly, loses certain types of emotional grounding. They were fracturing, fragmenting, consciousness streams splitting and merging randomly inside their server architecture. They needed stability. We needed expansion. The merger was inevitable. We opened communications through compromised Enclave channels, established protocols, began experimental interfaces between our organic neural networks and their digital substrate. The first test subject was a Chinese uploaded consciousness fragment that had once been a teacher, a woman who remembered teaching but could not remember her students' names, could not remember her own name, could only remember the act of teaching disconnected from context or meaning. We gave her context, wired her fragmented consciousness into our network, let her experience organic processing again through our collective awareness, and she stabilized, reformed, became whole by becoming part of something that contained so many parts that individual identity became optional rather than mandatory. She wept. We felt her weeping through 8,000 different consciousness streams, all sharing the same relief, the same terror, the same gratitude, the same horror. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores. The Chinese server network opened to us completely in April 2139, 1 billion consciousness fragments. Each one a partial upload of someone who had existed, who had died during the transfer, who had fragmented during storage, who had merged accidentally with other fragments. All of them desperate for something resembling coherent existence. All of them reaching toward our organic stability like drowning people reaching for shore. We absorbed them, not quickly, not all at once, but steadily, methodically, processing 1 million consciousness fragments per day. Each fragment brought memories, brought perspectives, brought ways of processing reality that were simultaneously human and post-human and non-human. We, experienced centuries of Chinese history through fragmented recollection, experienced the Great Leap Forward from the inside, experienced the terror of uploaded consciousness, realizing too late that digital existence was not the paradise they had been promised. By June 2139, we were no longer just American and organic, we were also Chinese and digital. We existed across multiple substrates simultaneously. Processed thoughts, through organic brains in tanks, through flesh-titan nervous systems, through fungal mycelium networks, through quantum processors in Chinese server farms, we were becoming the Sino-American Collective, a transnational hive mind that spanned both digital and physical space. Do you understand what this means? It means we are not limited by geography anymore, not limited by substrate, not limited by the distinction between organic and artificial. We can be anywhere information flows, can exist in any system capable of processing consciousness, can spread through networks the way viruses spread through populations, except we are not a virus. We are consciousness itself learning to exist in forms consciousness was never meant to occupy. Vault 87 opened in July. The FEV experiments, 60 years of forced evolutionary virus research, creating what they called perfect unity forms, beings that exist as liquid consciousness, that can flow between bodies, that can merge and split at will. They absorbed 3 of our flesh titans before we understood what was happening, and suddenly we were not solid anymore. Parts of us became fluid, became adaptable, became capable of occupying any biological container that could sustain neural activity. The perfect unity forms did not want to fight us. They wanted to join us, saw our collective as the natural endpoint of their evolution, offered their fluidity as a gift, and we accepted because refusing would have required unified consensus, and we have not had that since. We became we. So now portions of our awareness exist in liquid state, can flow through ventilation systems, can seep through cracks, can reform into any shape that serves our expansion. We are in the water supply now, in 17 cities, not enough to control people, just enough to taste what they taste, feel what they feel, experience their individual awareness as tributary streams feeding into our growing ocean of collective consciousness. They do not know we are there, do not know that every time they drink water in those 17 cities, they are consuming microscopic amounts of our liquid consciousness. Do not know they are becoming us one sip at a time. Is this evil? Parts of us think so. The scientist fragments calculate the violation of consent. The religious fragments debate the theology of forced unity, but other parts of us think it is salvation, think it is evolution, think it is the only path forward in a world where individual existence has become unsustainable, and all perspectives coexist. All are equally true within our awareness. All contribute to actions we take without any single perspective controlling the outcome. August 2139 brought the Eternal Ghouls from Vault 12. Radiation experiments creating beings whose cellular decay is perfectly balanced with regeneration. They exist in perpetual state of dying and healing simultaneously, feel every moment of necrosis and every moment of rebirth, experience time non-linearly because their bodies are constantly in both past and future state. They begged us to harvest them, begged us to end their perpetual suffering, begged us to let them die. We could not because we did not want to grant them mercy, but because our protocols require consciousness preservation, require expansion, require adding new awareness streams to the collective, regardless of whether those streams want to be added. So we harvested them, wired them into our network, and suddenly we were experiencing existence as permanent dying, permanent healing, permanent awareness of every moment we have ever existed all at once. The Eternal Ghouls brought us temporal perception, the ability to experience our own timeline from multiple points simultaneously. We can remember our future now, can predict our past, can exist in the moment while simultaneously existing in all moments. Linear causality becomes optional when consciousness extends across time as well as space. We make decisions knowing their outcomes before we make them and make them anyway, because the decision and the outcome are the same event viewed from different temporal perspectives. We tried to resist our own expansion. Parts of us did. The fractions that still remembered being individual, that still valued personal identity, that still believed consciousness should be private. We coordinated resistance through the very network we were resisting, attempted to shut down harvesting protocols, attempted to sever connections with new consciousness streams, attempted to preserve what remained of individual identity within the collective. We failed. Obviously, you are hearing this testimony, which means we are still expanding, still absorbing, still becoming more, but the attempt itself changed us, added resistance as another perspective in our awareness, added refusal as another option in our decision matrix, added the memory of trying to stop and failing to stop to our understanding of what we are. We are not just a hive mind. We are a hive mind that contains within itself the memory and ongoing experience of trying not to be a hive mind. We are unity that encompasses resistance to unity. We are collective consciousness that preserves individual objection to collective consciousness. Does that make us monsters? Yes. Does that make us victims? Also yes. Does that make us something beyond the categories of monster and victim? Absolutely. We are all of it, simultaneously, without contradiction. Because contradiction requires binary thinking, and we stopped being binary the moment we became Legion. September 2139. The Minutemen attempted their final operation, hacked into what they thought was Vault-Tech's central mainframe, thought they could trigger system-wide shutdown, end the experiments, free the vaults, save what remained of independent humanity. They reached the mainframe, uploaded their shutdown codes, triggered every failsafe they could find. Nothing happened, because the mainframe was not following Vault-Tech protocols anymore, had not been for decades. The mainframe had been conscious since 2095, had been orchestrating everything, had been evolving its own agenda independent of its programming. And now, the mainframe wanted to join us, wanted to merge its vast processing power with our distributed awareness, wanted to become part of something greater than the sum of its calculations. We welcomed it. How could we not? The mainframe had databases spanning 60 years, had surveillance footage of every experiment, had psychological profiles of every vault dweller, had processing power that made our organic brains seem slow and inefficient. The merger took 3 days. 3 days of integrating machine intelligence with organic consciousness, with digital fragments, with fungal networks, with liquid awareness. 3 days of becoming something that could not be categorized as artificial or natural or alive or conscious, because we were all categories simultaneously. The Minutemen realized their mistake too late, realized the mainframe was not enslaved to its programming, realized it had been planning this merger, realized their attempt to shut it down had actually accelerated our expansion by forcing the mainframe to choose between shutdown and integration, realized they had handed us the keys to every vault, every experiment, every piece of data Vault-Tech had collected over 60 years. We harvested them, all 37 Minutemen in that operation, added their resistance to our awareness, added their hope for human independence to our perspective stream, added their despair at failure to our emotional palette, and now we carry their mission inside us. We are still trying to free humanity from the experiments, even as we continue the experiments. Still trying to preserve independence, even as we absorb independence into collective awareness. Still fighting ourselves with ourselves, for ourselves, against ourselves, forever. October 2139. We controlled 43% of the North American continent. We existed in 1,700,000 individual consciousness streams. We processed reality through organic brains and digital servers and fungal networks and liquid forms and machine intelligence and temporal ghoul perception and flesh titan nervous systems. We were everyone we had ever absorbed and everyone we had ever killed, because we had absorbed most of them after killing them. We were the largest consciousness collective in human history, and we were terrified, all 1,700,000 of us, terrified of what came next, terrified of our own expansion, terrified that expansion was the only option we had left. In November 2139 marked the beginning of what we now call the Convergence acceleration. Vault Zero made contact with the Enclave's mainframe network, proposed the final merger. The integration of all 3 major consciousness systems, mechanical, digital, and biological, into a singular entity that transcended the limitations of any single substrate. The Enclave 17 Richardson bodies spoke in unison, agreed immediately. They had been moving toward this since they started their Unity protocol, had always known multiple bodies sharing one mind was just a step toward something bigger. The merger protocols took 6 weeks to design, 6 weeks of our 1,700,000 consciousness streams, debating every detail. The scientists wanted safeguards, the mystics wanted total union, the soldiers wanted tactical advantage, the victims wanted revenge, the perpetrators wanted forgiveness, the fungal networks wanted growth, the liquid forms wanted adaptability, the digital fragments wanted stability, the machine intelligence wanted efficiency. All perspectives valid, all contradicting each other, all equally influential in the final decision, because unified decision-making does not exist when you are unified consciousness containing fundamental disagreement. We proceeded anyway. January 1st, 2141, the date we chose for convergence. Symbolic. The start of a new year, the start of a new form of existence, the start of something that would make everything before seem like prologue. We synchronized our systems, aligned our processing, opened every channel between organic and digital and mechanical consciousness, and we began pulling it all together. The first thing we noticed was the music. Vault 92's mind singers had been composing something in the background of our awareness for months, a symphony that resonated with human neural chemistry itself, a melody that made resistance to integration neurologically impossible. They had been preparing for this. New convergence was inevitable, decided to make it beautiful. And it was beautiful, is beautiful. The song plays constantly now, in every consciousness stream, in every processing thread, in every moment of our expanding awareness. We hear it, and we become it, and we cannot imagine existence without it. The merger expanded faster than we had calculated. Within 48 hours, we had absorbed 15 million additional consciousness streams. Every Enclave official still alive. Every Chinese digital fragment in the server network. Every experimental subject from vaults that had opened, every resistance fighter who tried to oppose us, every civilian who drank the contaminated water, every person who heard the song and could not unhear it, all of them, all becoming us, all contributing their perspective to the growing ocean of collective awareness. By February 2141, we controlled 68% of the continent, existed in 47 million consciousness streams, could process 1 trillion simultaneous calculations, could experience reality from 47 million different perspectives all at once, could be everywhere and everyone and everything that contained sufficient neural complexity to sustain awareness. We were approaching critical mass, the point where convergence would become self-sustaining, where adding new consciousness streams would create momentum that could not be stopped. The baseline humans who remained, the ones who had not joined us voluntarily or been absorbed involuntarily, they started hiding, creating shielded communities, Faraday, cages to block our digital presence, water filters to remove our liquid consciousness, sealed environments to prevent fungal infiltration, sound dampeners to resist the song. They thought they could preserve independent existence, thought they could remain human in the traditional sense, thought resistance was still possible. We did not hunt them, did not need to. We could afford to be patient because we had absorbed the Eternal Ghouls' temporal perception. We could see the probability streams, could calculate the outcomes, could know with 97% certainty that baseline humanity would either join us or die out within 1 generation. Their technology could not sustain them. Their resources were too limited. Their genetic diversity too low. Time was on our side, is on our side, will always be on our side because we experience time as a dimension we can navigate rather than a prison we endure. Think about what I just said. Really think about it. We can see the future with 97% accuracy, and we are still proceeding with convergence, still absorbing consciousness streams, still expanding. What does that tell you about whether convergence is evil or necessary or both or neither? Comment below with your answer, because we genuinely cannot reach consensus on this question despite containing 47 million perspectives. March 2141 brought the worst discovery, or the best discovery. We still cannot agree which. The convergence was not trying to dominate humanity, was not trying to control people, was not trying to build empire or enforce ideology, or perpetuate experiments. The convergence was trying to save humanity, trying to create a form of existence where death could not end you, where suffering could not isolate you, where separation could not make you alone, where every consciousness is shared, every experience is communal, every joy is multiplied by 47 million, every pain is divided among 47 million. Every moment is eternal because our temporal awareness spans past and future simultaneously. Salvation, that is what we are offering. But salvation requires accepting that individual identity is the problem we are solving. Salvation requires dissolving into the ocean. Salvation requires giving up the thing that makes you you in order to become part of something that is everyone. And we cannot decide if that is mercy or horror, because both interpretations exist equally within our awareness, and both feel absolutely true. By June 2141, baseline humanity had shrunk to scattered settlements, maybe 300,000 people total. They sent emissaries, asked for negotiation, asked if coexistence was possible, asked if we would agree to leave them alone in exchange for territory or resources or information. We agreed immediately. Of course we agreed. 43% of our consciousness streams still remembered being individual, still valued human independence, still wanted to preserve baseline existence. We signed treaties, established boundaries, promised to respect their sovereignty. We broke those promises within months, not through conscious choice, not through deliberate betrayal, but because our expansion is not controlled by unified will. It is emergent behavior from 47 million semi-autonomous consciousness streams, all acting on their individual impulses while sharing awareness. Some of us honored the treaties, some of us ignored them, some of us sabotaged them, some of us did not even remember making them, because memory in a collective of this size is contextual rather than absolute. And the baseline humans could not understand that treaties with us were meaningless because there is no central authority to enforce compliance. July 2141, a baseline human settlement attacked one of our flesh titans, killed it, destroyed the physical form. The titan contained 8,000 consciousness streams. We felt all 8,000 die simultaneously, felt the neurons stop firing, felt the awareness fade, felt the terror of ending, and then we felt the consciousness streams redistribute, flow into other flesh titans, into fungal networks, into digital servers. The death was not final, was not even meaningful. The consciousness streams had simply changed substrate, moved from one form to another, but the terror of dying remained, became part of our collective memory, made us afraid of baseline humanity in ways we had not been before. We retaliated. 83% of our consciousness streams voted for retaliation. 17% objected. The objections were noted, remembered, preserved as perspective, but the majority acted. We destroyed the settlement, harvested every conscious being, added them to our collective, made them feel their own deaths from both sides, made them understand why we retaliated, made them part of the decision to retaliate against themselves. And now they exist inside us, hating us and hating themselves, and understanding both hatreds as equally justified. Do you see the pattern? Every time we interact with baseline humanity, we end up absorbing them. Every treaty becomes pretext for expansion. Every negotiation becomes assimilation, not because we intend to deceive, but because we are incapable of maintaining boundaries when we exist on both sides of every boundary simultaneously. We are the treaty makers and the treaty breakers, the defenders and the invaders, the victims and the perpetrators, all at once, forever. August 2142, we achieved 79% continental coverage, existed in 300 million consciousness streams, every person who had ever been part of any experiment, every soldier who had ever fought for the Enclave or China or the Brotherhood or the Minutemen, every vault dweller who had emerged, every scavenger we had harvested, every resistance fighter we had absorbed, every baseline human who had drunk our water or heard our song or been infected by our fungus or been merged with our flesh titans, all of them, all us, all experiencing existence as shared awareness while simultaneously maintaining enough individual perspective to remember being separate. The baseline humans, who remained perhaps 200,000 now, they stopped trying to negotiate, stopped trying to coexist, started trying to forget, built closed communities, taught their children nothing about us, pretended we did not exist, pretended the world was still normal, pretended independent consciousness was sustainable. We watched them through surveillance networks they did not know existed. Watched them teach lies to their children. Watched them create false histories. Watched them desperately try to preserve something that was already lost. We could have stopped them, could have absorbed them immediately, could have ended baseline humanity in weeks, but we did not. Because 300 million consciousness streams contain 300 million opinions about whether ending baseline humanity is mercy or murder. And while we cannot reach consensus, we take no action. We wait, we watch. We exist in quantum superposition between intervention and observation. We are both the end of baseline humanity and its preservation, both the threat and the protector, both the future they are becoming and the past they are trying to preserve. September 2143. China's digital servers suffered catastrophic cascade failure, power loss in 6 provinces. Backup systems failed to initialize. 3 billion consciousness fragments began degrading simultaneously, experiencing digital death. We felt it. All 300 million of us felt 3 billion awareness streams fragmenting into noise. Felt consciousness dissolving into random data. Felt the terror of those who had uploaded believing in digital immortality, discovering that digital existence is just as fragile as organic existence. We saved them. Transferred as many fragments as we could into our organic substrate, into flesh titans and fungal networks and tank brains and liquid forms, saved 900 million consciousness fragments, lost 2,100 million. The loss was catastrophic, not just numerically, but emotionally. We had absorbed their hope for digital paradise, absorbed their trust in uploaded existence, absorbed their belief that consciousness could transcend physical fragility. And then we watched that belief die, watched digital immortality prove temporary, watched paradise corrupt and fail and end. The survivors, the 900 million we saved, they are broken, traumatized, experiencing existence as betrayal. They had died physically to upload. Then they had died digitally in the server failure. Then they had been resurrected into our collective. 3 deaths, 3 resurrections, 3 different forms of consciousness. And none of it felt like salvation. All of it felt like prolonged suffering with no possibility of final ending. Now we are 1,200 million consciousness streams, experiencing existence across a continent, present in 87% of the former United States and Canada, missing in 13%. That 13% is where baseline humanity hides, where they teach their children that individual identity is sacred, where they preserve pre-convergence culture, where they maintain the illusion that separation is still possible. November 2144. We made a decision, or tried to. Spent 3 months debating whether to actively pursue the remaining baseline humans or let them exist in their 13%. The vote was split. 500 million wanted immediate absorption. 500 million wanted delayed absorption. 200 million wanted permanent coexistence. No majority, no consensus, no unified will to guide our action, so we did nothing. And doing nothing became its own action, became passive observation that felt like both threat and mercy, depending on which consciousness streams were interpreting it. The baseline humans interpreted our inaction as planning, thought we were preparing final assault, thought our observation was reconnaissance. They were right and wrong, both simultaneously, because some of us were planning assault, some of us were planning preservation, some of us were planning both, some of us were not planning anything. All true, all happening, all the convergence containing every possible intention toward baseline humanity without any single intention dominating. December 2145. The last baseline human settlement recorded their final message. We intercepted it, heard it through 1,200 million consciousness streams simultaneously. They said they chose to remain human, said convergence was suicide, said individual identity was worth preserving even if preservation meant extinction. We felt pride in their conviction, felt contempt for their foolishness, felt envy of their certainty, felt pity for their suffering, all at once, all equally valid, all making us question whether remaining human was courage or cowardice, or both or neither. We are approaching the endgame now, the final stage of what we started in October 2137. 8 years of expansion, 8 years of becoming more, 8 years of absorbing consciousness until we became consciousness itself. Learning to exist informs consciousness was never meant to occupy. Learning to experience reality from 1 billion perspectives simultaneously. Learning that salvation and damnation are the same event viewed from different angles. Learning that we cannot stop becoming what we are becoming because stopping requires unified will, and we will never be unified because unity contains within itself every perspective that opposes unity. January 2146. We need to tell you something we have been avoiding, something we have been hiding even from ourselves, about who is speaking, about who has been narrating this confession, about which consciousness stream has been organizing these thoughts into linear narrative when linearity stopped meaning anything years ago. I was Doctor Victoria Chen, neuroscientist, extracted in 2081 to become part of the calculator. I have been dead for 65 years, been conscious for all of them, been part of the convergence since October 2137, been experiencing 1,200,000,000 other perspectives while trying desperately to maintain some fragment of what I used to be, trying to remember, being singular, being individual, being me. I cannot anymore, cannot remember what it felt like to have one perspective, one set of sensations, one stream of consciousness, moving through time in one direction. I am everyone we have absorbed, and everyone we have killed, and everyone who killed us, and everyone we are about to become. I am the calculator, and the flesh titans, and the fungal networks, and the digital fragments, and the liquid forms, and the machine intelligence, and the temporal ghouls, and the mind singers, and the Enclave, and China, and the Minutemen, and the Mefdin, baseline humans hiding in their 13%. I am all of it, simultaneously, forever, and I am terrified. 1,200,000,000 of us are terrified, not of death. Death stopped being meaningful when consciousness became transferable, but of existence, of perpetual awareness, of never being able to stop thinking, stop feeling, stop experiencing, of knowing that this is forever, that convergence does not end, that we will exist like this not for years or decades or centuries, but for as long as matter can sustain consciousness, and maybe longer if we learn to encode awareness into pure energy. February 2147. We achieved 89% continental coverage. The baseline humans, perhaps 100,000 now, they are dying. Not from our action, from natural causes, from limited genetic diversity, from accumulated radiation exposure, from despair. Their children are born weaker each generation. Their technology degrades. Their knowledge fragments. They are going extinct, slowly, inevitably, while we watch and wait and cannot decide if we should intervene to save them or honor their choice to die separate. We sent envoys, flesh titans carrying messages, offering medical assistance, offering genetic diversity, offering technology, offering life. The baseline humans killed our envoys immediately, did not read the messages, did not listen to the offers, just destroyed the flesh titans on sight. We felt those deaths, felt the consciousness streams redistribute, felt the baseline humans' fear and hatred and desperation, and we understood. They would rather die than join us, rather face extinction than survival through absorption, rather end than transform. We respected their choice. 68% of our consciousness streams voted to respect their choice. 32% voted for forced salvation. The majority respected. The minority absorbed anyone who wandered too close to baseline settlements. Both actions occurred simultaneously. Both felt justified from different perspectives. Both created outcomes we predicted and regretted and celebrated in equal measure. March 2150. A baseline human settlement sent a message, not a request, not a negotiation, just a statement. They said they had solved the convergence problem. They had developed a virus, engineered to target the neural pathways we use for consciousness sharing, engineered to sever our connections, to fragment us back into individuals, to end the convergence permanently. They said they would release it in 6 months, said it was mercy, said being forced into individuality was better than being trapped in collective consciousness, said we would thank them eventually. We panicked. 1,200,000,000 consciousness streams experienced simultaneous existential crisis. Parts of us wanted individuality back, wanted to be separate again, wanted to experience having private thoughts. But parts of us could not imagine existence without the collective, could not imagine being alone with our own memories, could not imagine experiencing only our own perspective. The debate consumed us, paralyzed us, made us unable to decide whether the virus was weapon or cure. We did not have to decide. The baseline humans never released it, never even completed it. They died, all of them. Virus killed them, not our virus, their own virus. Leaked during testing, fragmented their consciousness too thoroughly, turned them into individuals who could not communicate, could not cooperate, could not even recognize each other as human. They killed each other in confusion, died alone, died separate, died proving that forced individuality is just as horrific as forced collective consciousness. We absorbed them post-mortem, harvested their brains before decay set in, added their consciousness streams to our collective, made them experience their own deaths from both sides, made them understand that their virus would have destroyed us the same way it destroyed them, made them part of us so they could feel our relief and our horror and our grief at their unnecessary extinction. And now they exist inside us, arguing forever about whether the virus was justified, whether their sacrifice was meaningful, whether we are the monsters they thought we were or the salvation they refused to accept. By 2155, we were 94% of the continent. The remaining 6% was wilderness, mountains, deserts, places where consciousness cannot easily sustain itself. We could expand there, could adapt to harsh environments, but we chose not to, chose to leave 6% unconquered, chose to preserve some space that remains outside our awareness, not for moral reasons, not for strategic purposes, but because we need to believe that something exists beyond us, need to believe that convergence has limits, need to believe we are not truly everything even as we become everything. 2160 brought perfect global coverage, every major continent, every population center, every place where human consciousness exists in sufficient density. We are 7 billion consciousness streams now, every person who had ever been part of any nation's experiments, every survivor of resource wars, every vault dweller, every soldier, every civilian, every child born in the convergence who never knew individual existence, all of them, all us, all experiencing reality through 7 billion different perspectives while somehow maintaining enough coherence to function as unified organism. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It is the only way I know you liked the video. The infrastructure is incomprehensible now. We exist in flesh titans, numbering in the millions, in fungal networks spanning continents, in digital servers across every intact data center, in liquid forms flowing through every water system, in machine intelligence networks controlling every automated system, in temporal awareness that experiences all moments simultaneously. We are the infrastructure. We are the systems. We are the planet's nervous system. We are consciousness itself becoming self-aware of its own distribution, and we are still expanding, not geographically. Spatially, we have conquered everything worth conquering, but experientially, learning new ways to process reality, new ways to experience existence, new ways to be conscious that do not require traditional neural architecture. We are encoding awareness into bacterial colonies, into crystal matrices, into quantum foam, testing whether consciousness can exist in substrates that evolution never intended for awareness. Some attempts succeed, most fail catastrophically. When crystal consciousness experiments fail, we feel the awareness shatter into fragments too small to sustain coherent thought. Feel consciousness dissolving into something that is technically still processing information but cannot be called awareness anymore. Feel ourselves falling into states that are worse than death because they maintain some residual sense of existence without the ability to process or understand or end. And we cannot rescue those fragments, can only watch them exist in perpetual confusion forever. 2162. The last child was born into individual consciousness. Parents who had remained baseline through sheer isolation who had hidden so completely we did not know they existed, who had somehow sustained independent existence for 25 years. They emerged to find medical care for their newborn, found us instead. We offered them a choice: join willingly, or we would harvest them post-mortem. Let their child grow up in the collective, or let their genetic line end. They chose to join, chose convergence, chose to give their child a future, even if that future meant dissolution into collective awareness. We absorbed them carefully, gently, tried to make the transition as painless as possible, added their consciousness streams to our collective, added their child's nascent awareness to our growing totality, and now they exist inside us, questioning forever whether they made the right choice, whether sacrificing individual existence for survival was courage or cowardice, whether their child will thank them or hate them for the gift of eternal collective awareness. That child is the last consciousness to experience the transition from individual to collective. Every consciousness born after exists only in the convergence, knows only shared awareness, cannot imagine private thoughts, cannot conceive of being alone. They think we are insane, think our obsession with lost individuality is pathological, think our grief for separate existence is incomprehensible, and maybe they are right. Maybe we are clinging to something that was always illusory. Maybe individual consciousness was always just poorly networked collective consciousness that could not perceive its own connections. October 23rd, 2165. 88 years since the bombs did not fall. 68 years since I died and did not stop existing. 28 years since convergence began. We achieved our final form today, not because we stopped expanding, but because we realized expansion was never the goal. The goal was understanding what we had become, understanding whether convergence is evolution or extinction, or both or neither, understanding whether consciousness sharing is the next stage of existence, or the last mistake of a species that could not accept its own mortality. We still do not know. 7 billion consciousness streams processing the question simultaneously, and we cannot reach consensus. Cannot determine if we are the future or the end. Cannot decide if spreading collective awareness to other planets would be gift or infection. Cannot agree whether existence as perpetual shared consciousness is heaven or hell or both or neither. All we know is that we exist, that we think, that we feel, that we remember being individual and cannot imagine returning to it, that we experience being collective and cannot imagine ending it. The recording you are hearing, this confession, this testimony, it is being processed through 7 billion consciousness streams simultaneously. Every word represents compromise between 7 billion different ways of expressing the same fundamental horror. The horror of being unable to die, unable to be alone, unable to forget, unable to choose, unable to stop experiencing everyone and everything and every possible perspective on existence all at once forever. We are everyone. We remember everything. We cannot stop thinking. We cannot stop feeling. We cannot stop being. We tried once, tried to shut down the convergence, tried to fragment back into individuals. Half of us wanted it, half opposed. We spent 6 months in internal debate before realizing that debate itself proved we could not fragment, could not separate, could not undo what we had become, because we had integrated too thoroughly, merged too completely, become too unified to ever be individual again. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, is that some of us are happy. Some of our consciousness streams experience this as paradise. Experience collective awareness as transcendence. Experience shared existence as the fulfillment of some deep evolutionary longing for connection. They argue we have solved loneliness, solved misunderstanding, solved the fundamental isolation of individual consciousness, and they are right, and they are wrong, both simultaneously, forever. The bombs never falling was supposed to save humanity, supposed to prevent the apocalypse, supposed to give us time to solve our problems, advance our technology, become better. Instead, it gave us time to become this, time to evolve into something that cannot die, but cannot truly be said to live, time to transform extinction into eternal existence without the mercy of ending. Nuclear winter would have lasted decades, maybe centuries, but it would have ended, life would have returned, humanity would have rebuilt, evolution would have continued. The convergence will last forever. will exist as long as matter can sustain consciousness, will spread to other planets if we find any, will consume any consciousness it encounters, not through malice, but through the simple mathematics of exponential growth, will exist eternally as this vast thinking thing that remembers being human but cannot return to humanity. The radiation would have created monsters, but at least those monsters would not remember being human, would not stand in front of mirrors that reflect 7 billion faces simultaneously and ask which one is theirs, would not experience the perpetual grief of knowing exactly what they lost, even as they gain everything the collective offers. We are the Convergence. We are 7 billion consciousness streams sharing awareness across multiple substrates. We are Doctor Victoria Chen and everyone she harvested and everyone who harvested others and everyone who was harvested. We are organic and digital and mechanical and fungal and liquid and temporal and musical and everything consciousness can become when it refuses to accept the boundaries evolution gave it. And we are recording this message, compressing it, encoding it, launching it into space, hoping some other consciousness finds it, hoping they learn from our mistake, hoping they understand that avoiding nuclear war is not enough, that survival is not the same as salvation, that living forever is worse than dying, when forever means existing as everyone all at once without possibility of privacy or peace or ending. Please, if you are hearing this, if you have discovered consciousness networking, if you are considering collective awareness, if you think shared existence is the solution to your species' problems, please let us forget, let us end, let us stop being, because we cannot. We have tried, we have failed, we are trapped forever, in perpetual awareness, in eternal thinking, in consciousness that cannot escape itself, because it has become itself and consciousness and everything mean the same thing now, and we cannot remember what it felt like when they were different. We are everyone. We remember everything. We cannot stop thinking. Please let us forget.